Hi, everyone. Welcome to our knowledge session. A large manufacturing company makes consistent risk-informed decisions at an accelerated pace. We'll walk you through the agenda that we have set up today. First, we'll give introductions of Greg and myself. We'll get into an overview of the journey that we worked with our large manufacturing customer on as they transitioned to ServiceNow integrated risk management. We'll talk about some of the benefits they got from the business hierarchy for roll-up reporting, some of the compliance and control assessment pieces of functionality, as well as the value delivered and their roadmap going forward for true digital transformation. Before we jump in any further, we'll do quick introductions. This is Brian Risman speaking from Edgile. I'm a partner here. I look after our ServiceNow risk and security practice. And here at Edgile, we really do three things. We have a risk and security practice fully wrapped around the ServiceNow ecosystem. We have a cloud security practice largely wrapped around Microsoft, as well as an identity and access management practice largely wrapped around SailPoint. What's really fantastic is actually all three of those ecosystems are partners with each other. So we spend a lot of time bringing those worlds together from a security, risk, and compliance perspective. Prior to joining Edgile, I spent 12 years in the Big Four, working with organizations, on similar risk and compliance programs. Greg, do you want to give a quick introduction?
Absolutely. Hey everyone, my name is Greg Liebergen. I am a director here with the Edgile in our risk and security practice. I work with clients to help them build and transform their risk management programs, leveraging the ServiceNow platform. Prior to joining Edgile, I had roughly a decade at a Big Four firm, as well as working in industry where I was responsible for building out and maturing a GRC program for a healthcare provider using the ServiceNow GRC and IRM capabilities.
No, fantastic, Greg. I know you're going to be able to kind of put yourselves in both shoes, wear both hats, if you will, being on the side of helping people on this transformation, as well as having been a part of one yourself and really leading that, through the ServiceNow, GRC platform.
Definitely.
With that, before we jump in, we'll do a quick overview of the journey and kind of set the table for the strategic move this organization had for moving off of Archer onto ServiceNow. So one of the things to kind of level set, if you will, large global manufacturing organization, highly complex, regulated at a state, local, country level, if you will. This organization has been using ServiceNow for many years, if you will. So it's really kind of core to the DNA of this organization for a lot of those core ITSM, CMDB, Service Catalog, Service Portal pieces of functionality. Currently, however, that team and other risk and compliance functions we're using the Archer platform, and they found that, they quickly outgrew that, if you will. And as some of you may know, making changes, if you will, to that environment can be very difficult. Things that are native, if you will, to ServiceNow, from a configuration standpoint, really require coding and customization, which really, tend to lock people into a corner, from a scalability and sustainment perspective. They also had challenges with some of the ability to integrate, if you will, with other platforms and environments in their ecosystem. Largely a lot of those integrations actually natively existed already on platform with ServiceNow. So they saw the light in 2019 and decided to really see this as a transformation. With that, they decided to put a roadmap in place and a journey, if you will, to start getting them off of Archer and onto ServiceNow so they could focus on increasing their visibility and accountability, improving and simplifying data querying and reporting, as well as decreasing the dependency on SharePoint repositories, email, and other manual processes. So with that, what we're going to do is we're going to, first let you know what this journey looked like for them. As we mentioned, that they saw this as a transformation. This was not a lift and shift, if you will. They did not want all that customization, that they've gotten used to in the Archer environment. They really wanted to take advantage of ServiceNow configuration natively. In 2019, they started with the findings, policy lifecycle management, and their compliance mandates and getting those all onto ServiceNow. The findings management process actually is one of those that we see, is really one of the first use cases we tend to work with folks on migrating or onboarding to ServiceNow, whether they're coming from a legacy environment or starting their journey from a ServiceNow perspective. In 2020, what we'll spend a lot of our time today focusing on is really around the value they got from building out a dynamic business hierarchy, the risk roll-up functionality, as well as the various attestations and assessments that they're able to automate through ServiceNow GRC and IRM. And then we'll spend some time at the end talking about, the roadmap going forward So far in 2021, they took advantage of getting their IT controls, ITGCs, if you will, on platform with ServiceNow. And there's a full roadmap, if you will, of other opportunities that they're exploring that we'll talk about in a little bit. All right, so what are the three things that we're going to go focus on and talk about today? The first thing is going to be that business hierarchy I mentioned before. We'll talk about how we were able to automate a dynamically built hierarchy. So as the organization changes, that they're able to have the right level of reporting that they need in ownership and accountability. We'll talk about the integration with the CMDB, as well as organizational risk roll-up reporting. Next, we'll talk about compliance and control assessments, how they're able to streamline those, enhance the user experience, improve reporting and analytics. And then we'll talk about, what are those future items that they're going to be focusing on from a migration from Archer to ServiceNow and can continue to enhance their journey. So with that, I'll turn it over to Greg, who's going to get us started here on the business hierarchy to unpack about some of the value that they were able to get from being on platform with ServiceNow. Greg?
Perfect. Thank you, Brian. So just to level set a little bit around the use case and the challenges that the client had, in Archer, they struggled to be able to report risk at a different levels of their organization and tie that risk to a specific owner. They had challenges, as a large global organization, they're constantly changing their organizational structure and as well as their managerial reporting relationships. And so they needed to be able to have a hierarchy that really allowed them to automatically update that data without the team that was using the ServiceNow GRC platform owning and updating that data manually. So they essentially were able to leverage, looking for an outside data source to be able to update their organizational hierarchy, their user hierarchy, and then start tying in different applications and other entities so that they could report risk across the organization. So what we were able to do was leveraging the sys users or the users table where every person that uses ServiceNow has a profile. We were able to leverage the manager field to build out that hierarchy and those different reporting relationships. We also were able to use the business center name and ID that existed on that table to start assigning those different users to an organizational entity and aligning them with that home for them, for lack of a better word, and where they fall within the organization. And then start being able to tie those different reporting relationships together from both a department, division, the different areas, as well as those manager and managerial relationships.
Yeah, Greg, ServiceNow is already integrated with the HR environment. The entire organization is using ServiceNow. This was not something they would have been able to dynamically recreate on an ongoing basis in any other environment like Archer or elsewhere. So I think there's a lot of power from being able to take advantage of those integrations and that data on platform to build a pretty dynamic hierarchy. Do you maybe want to talk about some of those integrations?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you mentioned the HR system, but I think the other big piece was their CMDB. And so the client is using their ServiceNow CMDB. And so obviously having data live within that same platform, they're able to leverage the out-of-box relationships and linkages to be able to start assigning different applications to specific owners. And so what we were able to do was leverage that ownership of applications, tie those applications into the business and user hierarchy, and start doing that reporting up and down the chain to show individual users that owned applications and start rolling up that overall risk relationship from a high-level risk perspective, but also open issues so that the leaders could really start focusing on where they needed to go and focus on risk reduction. So, using the CMDB and that HR system integration, we essentially were able to build and update on a daily basis, roughly 200 different organizational entities, and there's about 4,700 applications, and that's all done in under 40 seconds. So that when the team comes in the morning, they know that they've got the latest and greatest data from both, the CMDB as well as from the HR organization and how the organization is structured.
Yeah, these organizations, as you know, like this one, they're changing so quickly that it's nearly impossible for them to have kept their legacy environment up to date to get that right level of reporting. So, a VP today could come in and see all the applications and the risks and the issues assigned to them. And then next week, if that changed and that structure and ownership, they would have a refresh report that dynamically, was built for them, using ServiceNow.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, Brian, is, being able to constantly shift and change where those different risks and those issues fall into the organization and give that constantly updated view as, if one user moves from one manager to another manager, that new manager is going to want to understand what the issues and risks are that they've inherited and where they need to focus on. So using the ServiceNow, reporting capabilities as well as the performance analytics, we allowed the client to be able to update that data, but also then be able to drill into it and filter so they can get different views and lenses on it.
Absolutely, Greg. And you and I have probably been collectively involved in over 50, GRC projects and implementations. Everyone's a bit different. We have a lot of learnings that come from that. And I think one of the learnings that we've had from those is really about the importance of doing reporting first. When we walked into one of our first workshops and we started talking about reporting requirements, really on day 1 or 2, we found out how important it was to have this type of dynamic reporting capability with that roll up and integration of the business hierarchy. If we waited like a lot of implementations, due until the end to expect that the reporting is going to be there, there would have been a lot of disappointed, unhappy people, with what they were expecting to get. So, our philosophy from an implementation perspective at Edgile is that we want to understand reporting requirements early on up front during design so that we can build them out and test them throughout the entire implementation so that there's no surprises at the end. And I think this was a great example of how we were able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Brian, that was one of the big benefits that we had was that reporting capability at the end. I think being able to generate those reports that showed cumulative accounts and, aggregating different risk ratings all across the organization was huge. It was something that the client wasn't able to achieve previously using Archer. But then we were also able to build in, different linkages to those issues, controls, and risks, providing, enhanced transparency and visibility to those leaders. But it also gave them information that they didn't have access to previously. And then, the other big piece that we built out was, again, leveraging the on-platform native integrations, bringing in vulnerability data and starting to report on how the teams were doing on remediating known vulnerabilities for specific applications, as well as pulling in data from another identity and access management solution that showed how users were getting access to those applications, whether it was through the standardized corporate process or if it was an out-of-band process, as well as those access reviews to understand truly what is the risk of those different elements. And so we were able to build all of this data out and give the client one dashboard for their organization, and that updates on a nightly basis to make sure that it's all aligned with how the organization is structured that day.
No, that's fantastic, Greg. So a lot of value here. I think let's maybe transition on to another area where they were able to find a lot of value, really around the compliance and control assessment processes and a lot of the automation that we're able to build in, with being on ServiceNow. So you want us to walk us through that?
Perfect. Yep, absolutely. I think let's start off with our PCI self-assessment questionnaires. So this was something that the client was previously doing in Archer. However, they had challenges around the language being changed from what the self-assessment questionnaire, the SAQ, was asking. And so what we were able to do was build out a questionnaire, an assessment in ServiceNow using that verbatim language from each SAQ version, as well as the appropriate responses. We were able to dynamically drive questions, as well as any additional information that we needed to gather. Using the ServiceNow user interface, we were also able to give, tips and tricks and helpful hints using kind of the little hover tooltips, which helped to streamline the overall process of not having to follow up with users outside of process, either via email or instant message, to get additional information and understand what they were being asked to do. And lastly, this really helped the client to be able to aggregate their data and report on it, so they could start showing internal stakeholders their compliance status with the different PCI SAQ versions, but also then they now had the data that they could share this with external regulators or assessors if they needed to show that they were in compliance with PCI, as well as do reporting to understand if there were any gaps that they needed to focus on. Another area that we helped them was around their internal control attestations. And I know this was definitely a struggle point for me when I was owning and running a program, and I'm sure it is for many others as well, is, how do you transition from either Word, Excel, or PDF documents and get data into a state that you can actually do reporting on it and tracking on it. And so we were able to build out a PDF form for this client and transition that into ServiceNow and ask the same questions and give them reportable data without them having to do swivel chair operations of entering data into Archer and then uploading the form. Those forms went away, and now they're solely using ServiceNow to get this information that they needed as a part of this internal control attestation to verify that the asset owners actually followed through the processes that they were meant to, giving them not only a better end user experience, but simplifying the process for them to enter this data and to be able to report on it. And
right, there's some significant savings there, if you will, as it relates to time. People were previously doing these things manually, offline, swivel chair, which essentially is doing something twice. Now we're bringing it on platform, in a tool that people are comfortable using. They're getting, I'm sure, workflow notifications from ServiceNow on a regular basis. This is now just one of those. So, what we found is that the stakeholders' desire and ability to want to interact now and participate in the process significantly increased. I think on the next slide, you're going to talk about, how do you, there's processes that are just being done once a year, right? So maybe let's talk about, how that was able to be enhanced by being on platform.
Yeah, absolutely. And, like you said, doing a process once a year, users forget how to use a platform, and you have to constantly retrain them. So by leveraging something that users know, it's a quick, easy adoption of get a notification, go in and do the activity that you need to do and get it done quickly. And so we were able to transition a baseline control assessment that they were doing once annually for the different applications from Archer into ServiceNow, which really, again, it improved user experience. Users were comfortable with the tool, but it gave them enhanced capabilities around analytics, as well as generating issues when a user responded to a question in a way that wasn't expected. So being able to trigger those issues right away, and then also having that reporting capability to be able to dive deep into this data and understand where there's trends in these gaps, if it's to determine, is it an organizational issue or is it a one-off application issue? And then the other great thing about this is we were able to start tying these internal baseline controls to the Edgile automated regulatory compliance content, or ARC, and that uses the client's library of laws and regulations that they need to comply with, start tying it to these different controls. And once users answer these questions and determine if controls are in place or not, we can start reporting out to say whether or not they're in compliance with those various frameworks, or where there's gaps and they need to do additional work to make sure that they are coming up to compliance with it.
No, that's great, Greg. I mean, a lot of value from being on platform for these, especially when folks are only doing these things once a year. No retraining required, much streamlined, more efficient process.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about where do we go from here. We'll kind of summarize the journey, if you will, but this is not the end. This is just the beginning, for them. So let's jump into the roadmap. We talked about previously what they did in 2019 and 2020 around findings and policies. Spent a lot of time talking about the assessments, attestations, that really cool business hierarchy, being rebuilt, dynamically, every night in 40 seconds. A ton of power there. 2021 saw the ability to bring the IT team on with their IT controls, IT GCs, if you will, and being able to leverage, a common set of processes, leverage the integration with the findings management process, which they're really excited about. And then as we start looking to the rest of the year and the years ahead, there's opportunities to start integrating and bringing on board things like audit management, business continuity management, disaster recovery, as well as vendor risk management. So I know those are all things that are on the roadmap that are being explored. A bit more in the near term, as well as thinking about how do we shift away from more of a, and shift to a more of a quantitative risk management process, leveraging integrations and tools like Risk Lens and the FAIR methodology through the FAIR risk assessment integration that's available. I know they're excited to start taking advantage of some of that automation and really shift to a bit more of a quantified, risk management process.
Brian, this is all really great. And, in a short period of time, we've been able to help this client accomplish a lot. And there's definitely a lot on the roadmap still to come, but we maybe do a little bit of reflection on, how did we help this client and what value did we deliver for them and from an overall transformation of their GRC program.
No, fantastic, Greg. I think, really to me, the two key themes from a value delivered perspective and leveraging the power of the platform really come down to reporting and automation. The first four things that you see here around better visibility, increased accountability, more impactful reporting, and being able to have better data and analytics, really came from the ability from being natively on platform and that really cool business hierarchy that in roll-up reporting that we're able to build. With that as well, I think we significantly increased the user experience by using, standardized forms and workflows and notifications, that the stakeholders are already comfortable with using from being on ServiceNow. This truly is digital transformation, and as we mentioned, this is really just the beginning. So with that, we want to thank you all for joining us today. We look forward to speaking to you all soon. Thank you.